Okay, now take it away, Ben. So,
All right. Okay, well, we are kicking off class number 2 of our Beginning Fusion 360 course. I'm Ben Brandt, same as last week. Before we get too deep into modeling, I know we spent a lot of time last week just sort of getting familiar with the program and just talking about navigating your way around your models. Hopefully we'll be spending more time on some modeling stuff today, but we'll cover a couple of things first and sort of give maybe a few of our latecomers a chance to get in. So first thing I want to do is just do a little bit of follow-up from last week. We had a question last week. Somebody was having trouble with their graphics on their system. Stuff wasn't showing up properly. Odds are they probably had an underpowered graphics card for what Fusion requires. But I was looking for some graphics settings here. So up on my screen here under the Help menu, it's the top right little question button. If you pull that down, there is a graphics diagnostic. And chances are you probably won't need to go in here for anything, but if you are having issues with either stuff is running slow or it doesn't look quite right, this will tell you a few things about how much RAM your graphics card has, some of the settings that are in effect. On a different computer of mine, I was able to tweak some of these settings, turn them on and off. They're not changeable here. I don't know if that's because it's my computer. Maybe on this system I can't change them on, or maybe Fusion made an update since then. But at any rate, there's some troubleshooting information here. And there's a little checkbox at the bottom that says limit these effects to optimize performance. So if things are running slow, you could probably check that box and Fusion will turn off some of the more intense processes that it uses, and hopefully things will run a bit quicker for you. So that is there in the Help menu as the graphics diagnostic. All right, next thing I want to show you guys, I'm going to jump back to the light switch plate that we worked on last week, just to give you a model to show with. Oh, doesn't want to open.
would you plug last week's class as well? Let everybody know it's available. They can go back and reference it if they need.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so if you haven't seen the announcements elsewhere, we do have last week's class recorded, and it's the link to the video is posted in the Toolmasters area at izzyswan.com. So if you log in there, you should be able to review what we did last week. That whole hour-long session is up and watchable. There we go. So I've got another version of the light switch here just to look at. So one of the things I talked about last week, I'll go in and edit one of my sketches. Oh, not that one. Well, sure, why not? I talked a little bit about constraining your sketches, like putting dimensions in so that everything is fully defined, everything is fully constrained, so Fusion knows how big something is or where it should physically sit in the space. And there's a feature that I've got turned on here. Oops, we'll go back into that sketch. If you go up to the top right corner, pull down the second to the right menu here, the one with your username in it, and go to Preferences. And down on the left-hand side at the bottom, there's a section called Preview. Now this is actually, it's still considered a preview feature of Fusion, so it's not like in there by default. So if you want to use it, you got to turn it on. And it's this first option here. It's labeled Sketch. It says Color Sketch Geometry based on the constraint status. And I'll just read it here, but then I'll explain it and show it to you. It says, creates a visual distinction between sketch entities that are fully constrained and those that have remaining degrees of freedom. Now I'd say I would recommend you turn this on. It's really useful. If I remember correctly, the first time I turned this on, I had to go out and accept some legal license agreement that I'm taking the risk of turning on these experimental features. It's not a big deal. A lot of places recommend you turn some of these on. But once I accepted that agreement, then I could come back into Fusion and turn on this sketch option. What that does is, this is actually something that I got used to using in SolidWorks. You can see here that this rectangle here, the lines are blue. And what that option did is it made them show up as blue, and the blue means that they're not constrained. So I can drag it around. So it's just another clue that tells you whether or not it's fully defined. So if I, for instance, if I put a dimension on the width here, hit enter. Now it's drawing everything as black, but the black means that it's now constrained. Now the height actually isn't constrained, so I mean it's not a perfect indicator, but the fact that it changed the color is what makes it handy. So you can just kind of at a glance tell that, oh, something's missing from my sketch. You don't always have to click and drag it around. So that color changing sketch thing is pretty useful. I use it quite a bit. So I'd recommend turning it on, checking it out.
Would you show everybody where the options menu is again one more time real quick?
Of course, no problem. We will go, it's up in the top right hand corner. It's this menu that has your username at the top of it, and it's under Preferences. And then here within the Preferences, if you go look down the left-hand side, all the way at the bottom is Preview. And the option here is labeled Sketch. Color the sketch geometry based on its constraint status. So it'll be blue if it's not constrained and black if it's locked down. And I actually made that rectangle a bit narrower, so now my light switch is narrower, my light switch plate. All right, one other bit of follow-up. I got a question today. Let's see, let me just check here. Hey, he's here. Dennis gave me a question this afternoon. He is coming from a pretty long background in SketchUp and wanted to know about bringing SketchUp files into Fusion 360. So he wanted to, preserve some of that work and maybe use some SketchUp models in Fusion. And you can bring SketchUp files into Fusion. For example here, I've got a project here called Fusion Demos. And I've mentioned before, it's kind of like a folder. You can put models in there, you can save your drawings in there. You can also just put files in there that you want to sort of keep grouped together with your project. So right up here in the project panel here, the data panel, there's a blue upload button. So I'll click upload, and I can either pick a file off my computer with this select files button, or I can drag and drop something here. I've got a window up on my other monitor here with, I went and grabbed, Izzy, I grabbed your Flipkart plans off your website, and I've got a SketchUp file that came with those plans. So if I drag it in here, there's Izzy's lathe Flipkart. I can upload that. And it's uploading that up to Fusion 360's cloud storage, so it'll become part of my project here. And actually, the Fusion 360's services can handle a lot of different file types. You can bring in SolidWorks files. You can bring in files from other CAD packages. So there's translators in there, so it knows how to bring that stuff into Fusion 360. Now it's taking a little bit here, so appreciate your patience. But anyway, when this comes in, because of the way SketchUp works compared to Fusion, is a SketchUp model is just sort of the part geometry. You don't have quite the same intelligence in your models as you would within Fusion. So you don't have, your whole history, your timeline of, first I extruded this profile and then I cut this hole It's just sort of like a mesh geometry that you can see and you can manipulate and you can add to, but it's not quite as friendly for making edits and changes in Fusion. But I guess we don't need to get too involved in that. I was hoping to show just what that looks like in here, but apparently we're having a little bit of trouble uploading, but we don't need to sit around and wait for that. But long story short, that is available. If you want to bring your models in from other sources, you can even bring in STL files, models off of Thingiverse. You can bring them in and just sort of drop them into your Fusion model and build stuff on them or around them. So we'll cancel this out.
Ben, do you know what about like flat files, like DXF files? Can you haul that kind of stuff into?
I believe so. I've brought in SVG files. I don't think I've done a DXF, but there's a pretty long list of supported file types that you can bring into Fusion, and it will at least let you view them, if not do something with them.
Okay, Nathan Horsley. Sorry with the names, guys. I'm the worst. I looked this up this week. There is another way in offline mode too, isn't there? Question mark. Can you do this in the offline mode? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, for instance, if your internet connection is down, you can do some work offline. You can create models, and they'll live on your computer. And actually, just I think by default, like the last 30 days maybe of models that you've worked on will sit on your computer, and they're also synced up to the cloud. So you can work on this stuff offline. I don't know about handling all the different file types. Some of that functionality might live up in the cloud, but I haven't spent much time in offline mode, so I'm not sure what else I could say about that.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Mm-hmm. All right. So I think that covers everything else I wanted to follow up on. Any other questions before we get into it here? I don't see much going by in the chat. That's fine. All right. So tonight we're going to cover some more just sort of basic solid modeling stuff. I know some of you want to get into assemblies and moving parts, and we'll cover that a bit down the road here, but this is only class 2 of 6. So I'm going to jump into my TMA Fusion project that I set up last week. And right off the bat, I've got an untitled, blank model tab up here. I'm going to hit save. And tonight we're just going to be making a basic model rocket. So we'll call this rocket. I'm going to click save. Now that model is going to show up here in my project. And we'll close the, here we go. We'll close the data panel just to get it out of the way. We don't need to keep it up on the screen. Now, of course, last week we did a light switch plate. Today we're making a rocket. It's sort of reminiscent of what people always say about 3D printing is you just make useless little widgets. But it's a good learning exercise, and we'll cover some more things about extruding shapes, revolving shapes. We'll do a little bit of work with patterning. We're going to extrude some text, and then depending on what time allows, we can probably make another model here just to demonstrate some other things about making patterns that are useful. That's something that we'll probably end up using quite a bit, is patterning things out. So first step, we've got our rocket here, our rocket model. At the top level of our browser here, it says Rocket V1. And as I've said before, I like to create a new component whenever I start modeling something new. So I'm going to make a new component. It's here named Component 1. Click on that text and we'll call it a rocket again. This becomes more important when you have more pieces in an assembly and you want to keep track of all the different parts. But here we're just going to make one solid piece rocket. We'll expand that out just so we can see what's underneath it. And like with just about everything else, we're going to start it off with a sketch, and we're going to go real simple here. So I'm going to go up to the sketch here and say Create Sketch. Now it wants to know what flat surface am I going to draw this sketch on. And I'm going to start with this, what I call the top plane or the top view plane. So if you look on your view cube here, it's sort of aligned with the top face. So I'll click on that. And now my viewpoint has changed, so I'm looking straight down on it. We can start drawing. So we'll go under the sketch menu, go down to the circles here, and we're just going to do a center diameter circle, or the C key for a shortcut. And I'm going to place my center point right on the origin here of the two axes. I'll click and start dragging out to a size, but I know that I want this to be a diameter of, we'll make it small, let's say 3/4 of an inch, 0.75. Or I could write, millimeters, I could say 20 millimeters. I don't think that's quite equivalent, but we'll make that 0.75, and we've got a basic circle. So over in my sketch palette window, I'm going to go down and click Stop Sketch. I'm sort of back in the 3D view. And we're going to extrude that up. So under the Create menu, we're going to create some new solid geometry with the Extrude function. So I'll click Extrude. It wants to know what profile, so where this select is highlighted, I click on our circle. And we'll start dragging it up just to get a rough idea. I think that's a little high. We'll bring it down to 1 inch. One thing you'll see here is as I'm dragging this up and down, it's snapping to about every 0.1 inches, so 1, 1.1, 1.2. If I zoom in, it gives me a little bit finer control. So now it's going in increments of 50 thousandths instead, 1.05, 1.1, 1.15. And of course, you could just type in the value that you want. We're going to make that an inch tall. Hit Enter. And now we've got just a basic cylinder. Now from this, I'm going to make sort of the next feature on this rocket model. I'm going to extrude this again, but I don't need to make a sketch anymore, at least not yet. Just by virtue of this top face of the cylinder being here, that can be the shape that we extrude. We don't have to have a sketch, we just have to have some sort of shape or profile that we can pick from and stretch it up. So if I go under Create here and hit Extrude again, now the profile that I want to extrude is this circle shape on the top. So I just click on the top of our cylinder, and now we are extruding again. So I'm going to pull it up, and of course it doesn't look much different, but there's a reason I'm doing a second extrude here, is to put a bit of a taper angle or a draft angle on it. I can type that in here where it says taper angle in the extrude window, but I can also sort of freehand it here just like I did with the blue arrow. This circle here, if I grab the circle at the top and move it sideways, we can sort of eyeball an angle that we want. So I think I'm going to go about -20 degrees. The negative just means it's going to slope inward versus positive is sloping outward. So if you've got some shape or some feature and you want a little bit of a slope to it, a draft angle to it, this is a good way to do it automatically. You don't always have to put chamfers on things. So I'll make that about -20 degrees and maybe make a little shorter, let's say 0.3 inches. I think that looks good. So this is the bottom stage of our rocket. I know that's not proper terminology for rockets, but there it is. So we'll click back to the extrude window, we'll click OK, and we've got the base of our rocket. Now to create the sort of the top stage and the nose cone, I could extrude this circle again. We're going to get we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to do a revolve. So I want to create a flat shape here that I can spin around to make my nose cone feature. So first, this is going to start with a sketch. So up to sketch here, we'll go create sketch. And I'm a little bit funny viewing angle here, so I'm going to click the home button up by my view cube. Okay, that looks a little more familiar. I can see my 3 planes here, and right here I can touch the edge of that front plane that's sticking out of the cylinder. But if I zoom up, it's kind of inside. Right now, it'll still let me pick it, even though it's inside the cylinder. So we'll click on it right there. And now I'm looking at the front plane here. We'll start sketching again. So we'll go under the sketch menu, we'll go to the line tool, and I will hover over the top surface of our rocket here, and as I get to the middle, it'll snap to the middle, and you can see there's a little blue triangle that shows up that tells us we're snapping to the center of it. So we want this to be centered. I'll click there, and now I can start drawing a line upward. So I'll bring that up a little higher. And I can either hit escape to stop drawing the line, or I can click on this check mark here that turns green when I hover over it. That stops the line tool.
Yeah, Ben,
now,
quick interruption at this point, if you don't mind. This was an interesting thing that came up, and I'd like to get your take on it.
Sure.
Is it better to work with primitives in some or to start with your model from scratch? I had someone ask that just here recently on the chat section, and I answered, typically if I'm dealing with primitives, I'm just playing with ideas. If I know what I'm doing with the measurement, that's usually the way I start. I just model it because I know the measurements I want, and that's typically the way I approach it. I'm sure it's different for everyone, but if I'm just playing around with an idea, I don't mind using the primitive models. What's your take on that?
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by the primitives necessarily, because primitives to me is
there any benefit from sketching and extruding over using the primitives, the primitive shapes that are already available that you can just click on?
Oh, yeah. So for example, because there are shortcuts in here. If you don't want to sketch everything, you can just go create and make a box or a cylinder or a sphere. I guess that that could be just a matter of your preference. I like the workflow of making sketches and extruding them out. Essentially, these box and cylinder and sphere things are sort of shortcuts that do the same thing. Like I've started up a new model here. I click cylinder. It's going to ask me similar things. It's going to say select a plane for the cylinder to start on, and then it's going to say place the center point. Specify diameter, okay, 0.75, enter, and now it's asking me to give it a height. So essentially, it's sort of done all the same things, but just wrapped it up into a tighter package. So right here it says, in my timeline I've got one thing here, a cylinder primitive instead of a sketch and an extrude. You're a little bit, I don't know, you could be a little bit more limited there because you can't go in there later and say, oh, I don't think I really wanted a cylinder, I wanted to extrude a little bit of a different shape. So you can't really edit that sketch. So there, that could be a limitation. So I typically don't use those primitives just because I like the flow of making a sketch first and then extruding it out. But yeah, if that's all you need, it's certainly a little bit quicker way to get there. All right. Hope that helps. So I'm going to jump back into our rocket model. One of the things you can do that sometimes is useful if you want to get a better perspective on things, when you're sketching, even though you're looking at it like a 2D drawing, you can still rotate your model. So I can push down my center mouse button and sort of rotate it around, and I can see that, oh, my sketch is sort of existing in the middle of the rocket. But if you want to go back to that view, you could click on the front of your view cube, or in the sketch palette, the first option here says look at. If I click this look at button, it'll realign things to look at my sketch straight on. Now, one of the things that happened when we clicked our line onto the top of our cylinder here, you see there's two purple points and this line across the bottom. That took the top surface of our extrusion here and projected it into our sketch. So now the top surface of our cylinder is like a part of our 2D sketch, but it's tied to the model. So if I change the width of this part of the model, the sketch will update to that as well. So I'll get back here. So to draw this out, I'm going to go back to Sketch and the Line tool, and I'm going to click on one of these corners here. Just draw a straight line up, and then I'll click again. I'll click again. Click the check mark, and now I'm going to add an arc. And there's shortcuts to drawing arcs, which I can show you next. But first, we're going to just use the arc tool. So under Sketch, go to Arc. And we're going to make a 3-point arc, which is basically just a small section of a circle. So I'll click on the line that we just drew, the end of that line, so it's tied to that. I'll click on the tip of the rocket here, the top. And now I have to give it a center point, but you can see it's sort of drawing out that arc the way we want it to look. And I'm purposely going to drag it out here so it's oddly shaped. And I want this to be a smooth transition from vertical up to a point. So over in my sketch palette here under constraints, I'm going to pick a constraint here that's called tangent. And if you look closely at the icon, it's a circle with a line sort of sitting flat against it. The tangent just means basically what you see in the picture there, that a straight line and a curved line are going to meet up so they're smooth with each other. So if I click this tangent constraint, now it's going to ask me, if I stop moving my mouse here, the little tooltip that pops up to select the sketch objects or change constraint type. So it's asking me to select the objects I want to make tangent. So if I click on the vertical line and then click on the arc we just made, now it's forced that arc to be a smooth transition into that line. So I'll click Escape to get out of that tool, and now I can say take this top corner and drag it up and down. Actually, I can drag it side to side here, which isn't quite what we want either. So this line, I want to make it vertical, so I'm going to take the horizontal vertical constraint, click that button, and click the line, and it'll force it into a vertical line. And then I think we'll put a couple dimensions on this. I'll go to Sketch, Sketch Dimension, and click this vertical line. 0.7, and we'll make it 3/4 of an inch. And then let's give this a height here. So I can go to the Sketch Dimension tool here, and I can pick this intersection point between the line and the arc, and then pick the top point here as well. And I can either, it'll show up as either an angle dimension like this, or if I drag it out far enough, it'll become a vertical distance, or if I drag it up here, it'll be a horizontal distance, but I want to just give that some height. So we'll make that about 1 inch tall, give it a nice point. And that's all we should need for that sketch. To turn that into a 3D object here, we're going to go into the Create menu, same place we found Extrude before, but this time we're going to do what's called a Revolve. So click Revolve. And now saying, what profile do you want to revolve? So it has to be a closed shape, a closed profile, and we've got that here with our sketch that we just made. Click on that. And then for the axis, under the Revolve window it says Axis, I got to click on the button that says Select. And now I can pick one of the three axes here. I can also pick one of the lines in my sketch. So I'm just going to click on this tall center line of my sketch, and it's going to revolve that shape all the way around. Now I could change that to a specific angle if I didn't want to go all the way around, but we're going to default to the 360-degree spin around. We'll click OK, and now it's starting to look like a rocket. Do one more feature here and then we can take a quick question break. Looking at the bottom of the rocket, we're going to give this a bit of a nozzle. So I'm going to create another sketch. So under Sketch, we'll say Create Sketch. And I'll click on the bottom surface here. I don't have to put it on one of these planes. Anything flat on my model I can draw on. So we'll click on the bottom of the rocket. And we will sketch a circle, center diameter circle. Place it on the origin, the middle here. Click and drag it out, let's say 0.3 inch diameter. Click to set that. Actually, I'll put a dimension on it so it's fully defined. Hit enter on the dimension. There we go. And I'm going to do one more thing in the sketch here is the offset tool. So under Sketch menu, go down to Offset. Just another way to, say if you have some complex shape and you just want to offset it, make it a thick piece. So I click the Offset tool, click on the circle I just drew, and now I get some arrows I can drag back and forth here, and it's just copying that same circle here, and I just give it a distance to offset it. So we'll offset it, I don't know, negative 50 thousandths inside, and hit enter. And now it's got a dimension here, so I've got my outer circle and then an inner circle. We'll click Stop Sketch. Zoom out a bit. And now we'll go back to the Create menu and Extrude with the Extrude tool. And I'm going to select, you can see actually I can select any shape here. I can select this outside ring, this inside circle. But I'm going to select this sort of donut shape that we made. Click on that. And I can drag it out. Let's make that 0.2. And then I can use the handle here, or I can put in a taper angle to give this a little bit of a flare. Let's say 15 degrees. Oh, interesting. You know, last time I modeled this, I didn't have the hole in the center, so the flaring is actually going out on the outside and in on the inside, so that's not the shape I wanted. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go back in my timeline here and pick the sketch. Oops, hit Escape. Right-click it. There we go. Edit Sketch. Let's get rid of that inner circle. Stop the sketch. All right, now it's solid. I'll create another sketch on the bottom of the nozzle. And here I can just do I could shell it out if I wanted to, but then it would go through the entire rocket body. We're going to sketch an offset here, and I'm just going to offset it from the existing outside circle. So I click on that, and I get that same offset control. Drag it in here, negative 50 thou. Hit enter. Stop that. And then I can go to Create, Extrude, pick that, and drag it in as a cut. Now if I drag it in straight like that, it's going to kind of cut through our nozzle. So I can give that the same angle here. I think it was 15 degrees. It's not terribly important as long as it stays inside. But I can look at it from different angles and see the red shape that it's going to cut out. Click OK on that. That looks more like it. So, any questions so far? We just want to give folks a little bit time to catch up.
John Nesbitt asked, this is back a little bit when you were making the flat profile for the cone before you extruded all that. He asked if the sequence mattered. I'm guessing that he asked, the sequence of how you were taking the measurements and making the cone the size you wanted.
Not necessarily. Sometimes the sequence can kind of get you if you're sketching and snapping to things, and maybe it'll automatically throw in constraints that you don't want, and then you just have to sort of go in there and pick that apart. But for the most part, yeah, the sketches themselves don't really depend too much on the order that you do things. That's more important in the timeline of what you do in 3D. Like features can be based off of other features, but the sketches themselves just sort of stand alone. So sequence isn't as important there.
Okay. Rob had asked, I'm having trouble getting the dimension tool to give me the height of the upper cone.
Let's jump into that sketch. Oh, okay. I'm guessing he's probably talking about this this height of the curved portion
here. Is that
here.
what you meant? Yes, that's it.
Okay. So I'll click that dimension and delete it. If I go to the sketch dimension tool, there's the dimensions work in lots of different ways depending on what you select them, or what you select as your 2 dimension points. So you kind of have to look carefully. Right now I'm hovering over this, it shows a little white circle. That's the intersection between the line and the arc. But if I move my mouse a little bit too low, now it's selecting this entire line. Or if I move my mouse a little bit too high, it's selecting the entire arc. So you got to kind of be a little, be sure you're on the right spot, and then click. So I'll click this point, and then I'll click I gotta move my mouse up here until I see the white dot, and click the tip of the rocket. And now, kind of how I showed before, that dimension shows up in a few different ways depending on where you place it. So like, I'm not holding on the mouse button right now, I'm just dragging it around, and it's kind of showing me in real time where that dimension is going to be. Like, if I get real close to the curve here, it's at an angle, so it's showing that distance at an angle. If I drag it out farther, it's perfectly vertical, so it's a vertical distance.
Okay, Rob said thank you. He was missing the white dots. Okay.
Perfect.
He asked also, can you revisit the offset sketch?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll stop this sketch. Let's go back.
Someone had mentioned this. Ben's crystal clear to me. Anybody else having trouble? Better now? Okay. All right. You're good. We had a little sound trouble there, but it's gone. Now it's me.
Okay.
Now Izzy. All right. Well, I'm not the important one. So.
Those internet connections can be trouble sometimes. Yeah, just offsetting, and actually I'll jump over in another window here. Any line or closed shape you can offset. I'm going to create a quick sketch here. I could create, let's create a polygon, a little hexagon here. Say I wanted to make a hexagon-shaped box, and I want to make the sides of it. Any line or shape, I can go out into the sketch menu and say offset towards the bottom here. and then I just click on what I want to offset. So it's the edge of this shape, then I can drag it inside or outside, and it'll just make, you know, more sketch lines offset from what I made. Or if I have a what's called a spline, I can offset that too. I hit the O key, that's a good shortcut. And now I've got that, and they're perfectly offset from each other, so if I change the shape, it maintains that distance for me.
Okay. All right, looks like we're clear of questions and good to go.
Very good.
Oh wait, Brad has one more. Why doesn't Ben use the S key shortcuts? Yes.
Oh, so yeah, there is a if you hit the S key, there's this right now it's the sketch toolbox because I'm in sketch mode. If you have tools that you use often, this little toolbox window, like right now it's just got line, rectangle, and circle. But if I can't find something in a menu, hit S again. If I can't find something in the menu, I can hit S, and I've got some shortcuts here, or I could search for them. So in the search box, let's say ARC for arc, and now it's just found 3-point arc, tangent arc, center point arc. So I could either pick the tool here or use the little up arrow to add it to my sketch toolbox. So now every time I hit S, that arc function is right there. So it's kind of a nice shortcut. You know, I've learned about the S key, the shortcut toolbox, but I honestly don't use it that often. I'm kind of a keyboard shortcut guy when I'm most of the time. So the stuff I use often, I'll keyboard shortcut, or I'll have the buttons up here. The sketch toolbox, or actually here, I'll stop sketch. Out here, it's model toolbox. I just think of S as shortcut. I don't use it that often. It's just not a habit that I've developed, or at least not yet. But it is there, and it is pretty handy. But at least for purposes of teaching, it's, you know, we're going to step through picking stuff from the menus just because it's easier to follow. But yeah, once you get fast, you can certainly use keyboard shortcuts, the shortcut window there, as much as you'd like.
Right on. All right, let's do it. Let's step forward here.
All right. So we're going to put some fins on our rocket, and I'm going to start by creating a sketch. So sketch menu, create sketch, and I will just pick this front plane, which is, you know, when we started this out, we centered the whole thing on the origin, which helps because we want our fins to come out from the center. So by using that front plane, it'll be centered. And we'll just get out the line tool, and I'm not going to worry so much about constraining it because I don't have to do that every time. I'm just going to draw a line. I'm going to start a little bit inside from the edge. Drag it out, make a little fin here, and click to make the end of it, and I'll start moving my mouse back up, kind of inside the edge. Click to make that line, and then in order to extrude it, we need a closed shape. So I'm going to keep going with the line tool, drag it up here, and intersect it with the first line we made. And now that you can see the inside color has changed, that means it's a closed path. We can extrude that out. And if I rotate here, you can kind of see the reason I put that sketch inside of the cylinder is because once we extrude it out, we don't want it to be separate from the cylinder, if that makes sense. Let's see if I can. If I drug it out here and we extruded it, it would start to separate as it got thicker. So we're going to put it inside there. So click Stop Sketch. So there's our fin. And we'll go up to Create and Extrude. And we'll pick our triangle. And now, I don't want to extrude just one direction. I'll exaggerate here, but now it looks off-center. Well, one of the things you'll notice here is because it's intersecting with the solid body of the rocket, it's assuming I want to cut. That's why everything is shown in red here, and it's actually starting to preview that I'm cutting material away with this. So under operation, I'm going to choose join instead. And now it looks gray, and you can kind of see, okay, it's adding material to our model. But I don't want to extrude in one direction. So under our extrude options, we can say direction. I could go two sides and go out one distance one way, another distance the other way. Or it makes more sense here is to go symmetric. So the same distance in either direction. Now we can give that some thickness. And the measurement here right now shows 0.1 inches. And that's 0.1 in each direction. But under measurement here, there's two icons. One that says, if you hover over it, it says half length, and the other says whole length. So I don't really care what 1/2 of this fin's thickness is going to be. I want the whole thing to be a certain thickness, so I'll click whole length. And now it looks thinner, but that's because now this 0.1 inches means that's the thickness of the whole thing. So I'll click OK on that. And now I want multiple fins around here, so we're going to have to make a circular pattern. So now that I've got this in 3D, and I could put fillets to round this over if I wanted to, but we'll go under the Create menu, and we'll go down to Pattern, and this is going to be a circular pattern. So I'll click Circular Pattern, and it's saying, what do you want to pattern? Do you want to pattern a face, like a surface, body, right? Actually, this whole rocket is one solid body. We've just been adding geometry to it. I actually want to pattern the feature. The feature being stuff down in your timeline here. So that triangle we extruded is a feature. So I've chosen that I want to pattern these features. And for objects here, it's asking me, it's highlighted select. It's asking me to select something to make a pattern out of. So down in my timeline, at the bottom here, if I hover over that extrusion that we just made on the end, I'll click on that. It shows, okay, one is selected. And we want to rotate it around an axis. So under the circular pattern here, we say axis. I click on select. And I can either click on, I could click on any one of these cylindrical surfaces. So this cylinder in the middle, just the fact that it's a round shape, then it knows there's an axis running through it. I can't pick the green axis in the middle here because this cylinder is in front of it. But I can also, the way I can pick something behind what I'm looking at is if I click and hold my mouse button down over it. If you wait a second, you get this little window here that comes up. You can pick. So it's giving me a list of everything that was under my mouse cursor. I can pick the face of the cylinder, or I can pick the y-axis. So I think I'll just pick the y-axis. It doesn't matter in this case because they're basically the same. And now it's starting to preview out what those fins are going to look like. So for the circular pattern, I want it to go all the way around, so full 360 degrees. And for quantity, I could bump that up to 4 or 5. I think I'll leave it down at 3. We'll click OK. And now we've got some fins. And then I'm going to close this model out with one more little feature, something that I just actually picked up off of a YouTube video today. I thought it was kind of a slick way to do it. We're going to put some text on the side. Let's go back to a home view position. I'm going to create a sketch. So sketch, create sketch. And let's pick the front plane. And that plane runs through the middle of our rocket, and that'll be more apparent here in a minute. We'll go under the sketch menu and choose text. And I'm going to put it on this section of the rocket here. So I'll just click in that general area, and we'll put a TMA for the Tool Masters Association. I'm going to make it bold here, and then this little circular handle should look familiar. That's for rotation. I can grab that. Oh, there we go. And 90 degrees. For some reason, text doesn't let you go a negative direction, so I can go all the way around to 270, and I can drag it up here. Let's make that height a little bit smaller, 1/4 of an inch. Just kind of drag it in there so it's about centered. Click OK. And in my sketch palette, I'm going to say Stop Sketch. And now you can see that a TMA text is sitting basically in the middle of our rocket, but it's in the position that how we want it to look. So I will zoom up on it here so we can see it better, and we'll go to create an extrusion with the extrude tool. Well, the one thing we're going to do different here that we haven't done before is we're going to tell it where to start from. First thing, we got to select the profile. So we click select, and if I hover over that TMA sketch we just did, it'll kind of light up. I'll click on it. I'm going to rotate the view a little bit. You can see the blue arrow is here to extrude out, but it's sort of coming from our sketch plane, which is right in the middle of our rocket. I want this text to be on the outside. So in the extrude window where it says start, it's defaulting to the profile plane. That's where we sketched it on. If I pull down that menu and choose from object, I can say I want to use that sketch, but I want to start extruding from the outside of this cylinder. So if I click the face of the cylinder, now it's highlighted and our arrow has kind of moved outward. I can grab that and drag it out, and that's a little exaggerated. We probably don't want it to stick out that far, but you can see the TMA text is now coming out of the side of the rocket, and it's got a little bit of that curvature. It doesn't actually wrap it around like you might expect, but it's a pretty close way to emboss some lettering on there. Let's make that a little bit smaller. So the extrusion distance, let's make it, I don't know, 0.03. That looks a little better. Click OK. And now we've got our rocket, our branded rocket, mind you, ready for a 3D print or just to show off to your friends. Okay. Any questions?
That's really cool. I did not know you could do that. That's really, really cool. If you did extruding distance negative, could you do it like an engraved text from David Lentz asking?
Oh, probably. Because it's all you've specified there is where you're extruding from, and an extrude could be either a join or a cut. So let's try that. Edit the feature. Let's give it a negative 30 thousandths distance. Oh, and I have to specify now that I want to cut. Yep, there we go. Now we've got engraved versus embossed.
Apparently we like the engraved better than the embossed because the embossed will cause wind resistance on the rocket. Very cool.
True.
Really, really cool. All right, guys, hit up with some questions here. Ben, let's see. How would the 3D printer handle the intersection of the fin to the cylinder?
It probably depends on how you orient it in the printer. If it's standing up on the printer, you have some supports under the fins, and then they would be connected together. Actually, I'm going to see here. Under the Inspect menu, this isn't necessarily 3D printing related, but it's kind of a nice tool. Where did it go? Inspect section analysis. If you want to look at a cross section, let's see, faces.
John, there wouldn't be any interference. It's a solid model when it's being printed.
Yeah, so what we've made is a solid thing here. So the section analysis, I can look at the cross-section of it. So if you were building up your 3D print bottom up, this would be, one solid shape across here. It probably wouldn't be very strong just because they're thin. If you had it laying down, it might be a little bit weaker depending on how the plastic gets laid down, but yeah, it all depends on your 3D printing process or how it's oriented. But this stuff's all connected, so it would be one solid piece regardless.
If you lopped off the nozzle and printed that separately, it would be stronger. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, possibly. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Would it be stronger, he was asking.
Oh, would it be? I don't think so.
Well, if you were wanting to print a larger scale model, that would be a really handy way to do that, is to kind of break it up into 2 pieces so you could,
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you could certainly
right,
chop your model into smaller parts and put in some geometry so they would mate together or glue them together, what have you.
Now, having a little bit of experience with 3D printing, I would say that you could actually print a rocket that would fly pretty well. I imagine it would be a one-flight thing. The heat from it would probably melt the PLA, or at least unless you put a metal sleeve or some kind of heat sink inside of it to keep the heat from doing it. Yep. Just looks like the fins would be supported on the base. So, all right. Any other questions, guys? I'd like to ask some questions if you guys don't mind. How many of you are interested in 3D modeling Fusion for 3D printing, and how many of you are thinking more along the lines of CNC stuff, or just designing your projects? So let's. What do you guys? Who's both for me? Both. Mike is CNC, 3D printing. Eventually all. Okay, CNC, design. So we got a little bit of everything. Modeling for shop. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Okay, so I mean, a lot of CNC stuff. All right, cool. All. Chad says all.
I want to learn all the things.
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from.
That is the true maker heart right there. I want to know everything. So, customer preview. Very good, Dennis. That's awesome.
Ooh, yeah.
Yep, that's a really nice, and Fusion is nice that you can do some really nice renderings in Fusion as well. So, Yep, very cool. How many of you have CNCs right now and are learning Fusion so you can use the Fusion on the CNC? Mike, Scott. Oh, there's a couple of them. All right, cool. Tim, Dennis, Dave. All right, we're 6 now. That's 6 out of 30, so that's 80% or 20% of us. Shaper coming in September. Andy, I know what you're working on, Andy.
Yep.
Brad has access to one. Okay, so quite a few of you. All right, that's really great. That's really, really cool. Okay. So I have a couple quick questions that are kind of rudimentary, basic questions that I still don't know. Can you change the color of the background in the sketch? Like if I wanted a green background behind the sketch, can I do that?
Yeah.
X-Carve.
In the sketch, let me see here.
Well, I'll tell you why, because in a lot of my video making, you'll see at the intro, you'll see a little model floating around in empty space. And in SketchUp, I just turn the background green, and I treat it like a green screen, so I can take it over into Chroma Key and just blur out the whole background. So I can actually, and then if I had a rocket 3D model, I could actually use my mouse to make it, my space mouse to make it move around like a rocket. So that's why I was asking. So.
Yeah, one thing I haven't touched too much on is down at the bottom middle of your window here, you've got a lot of display settings. So here there's a display settings menu. It looks like a little monitor. If I pull that up, you can play around with different visual styles, and we'll get to color in just a second here, but right now it's defaulting to shaded with visible edges only. I could turn off the edges and things look a little more smooth.
Oh wow!
So it's not a true rendering, but it looks a little bit more polished that way. I can also change the visual style to wireframe, so you can see everything all the way through, or wireframe with hidden edges. And now the hidden edges, the ones that are not really visible, are dotted lines. Sometimes this is helpful if you want to just look at a part straight on and see how things line up or work the way you expect them to. The other thing to notice here is this is still looking like a realistic perspective. You can go to display settings under camera, and I'm on perspective, but you can go orthographic, and that's more like a line drawing, so nothing sort of disappears into the distance. So you look at it straight on, that's how it looks. But it also, sometimes that looks a little funny. I like to work in a perspective camera because that feels more natural.
All right, John, to answer your question, yes, you can explode parts, but we build a solid model, so you couldn't explode this particular one.
Yeah, this isn't an assembly, but if you had assembled parts, you can explode it to a degree. We can touch on that once we have more parts to show. But yes.
Can you export as an animation like in SketchUp? I've never exported anything as an animation from SketchUp.
I've only played with the animation features in Fusion a little bit, and to me it wasn't super intuitive. I'd need to spend some time to really learn it. What I was trying to do at the time was I had some joints set up with parts that would turn and move with each other, but the animation didn't let me constrain it to those joints. I could do like a sort of animated exploded assembly, so I could animate the parts moving away from each other and then moving all back together. I know that there's more you can do with it, but it's not something I've had a need to play with much.
All right, very cool. Very cool. All right, well, it's 10 after 9, so I think here's a good time to stop it. Ben, anything, do you know what we're going to be working on next week?
I think next week we'll start touching on assembly, a little bit of assembly. I've got an idea. I think I mentioned this on Facebook earlier, but I'm probably putting together just a basic tabletop, legs, a skirt, and kind of showing how some of the assembly stuff works to make that happen.
I'm looking forward to that because everything I do needs assembly, so that'll be fun. Yep. And that's kind of where this is about as far as I've gotten with Fusion 360, so it'll be fun to see how all the assembly stuff works. I'm looking forward to that. All right, guys, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Again, we'll be back next week, 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. I will remind everyone who's in the class, links are now only going to be available through izzyswan.com Toolmasters page, and we'll no longer be posting them in Facebook. So if you're a member, you can have no problem. Just go to the members area of the website, and towards the bottom there, you're going to see the big banner with the Fusion 360 class and the dates. Each one of those dates will have the link next to it to get into the class. So that's where we're going to be next week, and I will, of course, put reminders up on Facebook when the class dates get closer. We are going to have some classes starting in March. One of them I will be teaching. It's going to be an introduction to rustic furniture design. And I say rustic furniture design, but it'll also kind of spill over into just basic furniture design as well to kind of help bring everybody up to speed, and then we'll kind of delve in more rustic as we get further down the pipe. Some really cool things that you can do with material you can pick up in your back of your house. So that'll be a fun class as well. So that's coming down the pipe. Ben, again, thank you so much, and good night, everyone.
Good night, all.